Why was everyone staring at her, as if she didn't belong there anymore? Maybe because to them she didn't. The morning sun cut across the Colorado mountains like a blade, carving long, golden lines over the firing range at Fort Carson. The wind carried the smell of burnt powder, dry earth, and something faintly metallic, spent brass scattered across the ground. Staff Sergeant Nina Castillo moved slowly along the range, a metal bucket in one hand, picking up shell casings one by one. The bucket clanked with every drop, the sound hollow, rhythmic, almost mocking. 3 months ago, she'd made a shot that most snipers would call impossible, 2,900 meters on the Afghanistan-Pakistan border. One round, one breath, one life saved. It had ended an ambush that would have wiped out her entire team. That day made her a legend. That same day also took everything from her. The RPG blast had torn into the helicopter on extraction. Shrapnel punched through her shoulder and sent her crashing into darkness. Now, every bend of her arm sent a flash of fire down her left side, the kind of pain you don't wince at anymore, just absorb, like background noise. She was still in uniform, still a soldier, but now she picked up brass. A hero on paper, a janitor in practice. Castillo, Sergeant First Class Marcus Webb called out across the range. His voice cracked like gravel over metal. "Make sure you get all those casings. We got VIPs coming for a demo. I don't want M stepping on your mess." "Yes, Sergeant," Nina replied, keeping her tone even. Webb wasn't cruel, just tired. He fought long enough to know that broken soldiers were better seen than remembered. She crouched again, her gloved hand brushing over the dirt, the faint ache in her shoulder reminding her of what she'd lost. Somewhere inside her chest, anger flickered like a pilot light that refused to die. When she looked up, something caught her eye, a target. Far out. Farther than any of the others. Barely visible, even through the morning haze. "That's gotta be over 3,000 meters, she murmured. She squinted, gauging distance the way only a sniper could. Elevation, wind, light distortion, every detail burned into muscle memory. Her longest confirmed kill had been 2,900. This was beyond that. She turned back to her work, just as the sound of engines filled the air. A convoy of Humvees rolled in, tires kicking up dust. Officers stepped out, American and British, crisp uniforms, polished boots, and faces that never smiled unless they were winning. Among them was a man she recognized instantly from military rumor and legend. Major Sebastian Blackwood, British SAS, a sniper with confirmed kills that had turned into myths, the kind of soldier who carried himself like the air bent to his will. He was tall, sharp-featured, with eyes that looked like they'd forgotten how to blink. "Gentlemen," Colonel Morrison, Fort Carson's base commander, began proudly, "welcome to our range. Today, we'll demonstrate why American marksmanship remains the finest in the world." "Impressive setup, Colonel," Blackwood said, his British accent clipped, precise, superior. His gaze swept the line of targets, then stopped. "That one there far out. What's that? 3,400 meters." "Exactly 3,400, Morrison replied. "We use it for special training exercises." "Extraordinary," said Blackwood, a faint smirk tugging at his mouth. "I don't suppose anyone's actually hit it." The silence said enough. Morrison's jaw tightened. "Well, it's more of a theoretical target." Blackwood's smile widened, polite but poisonous. "In Her Majesty's service, we prefer practical demonstrations." The group chuckled lightly. Nina didn't. Something about his tone cut deeper than his words, like he was used to being the sharpest man in any room. The demonstration began. Soldiers lined up at various ranges. At 800 meters, shots cracked across the open air, solid hits. At 1,200, fewer. At 1,800, barely any. Blackwood watched with mild amusement, arms crossed. When Morrison offered him the line, Blackwood took it with effortless grace. He was good, better than good. At 1,200 he hit center mass. At 1,800 he hit again. Then, almost theatrically, he looked at that distant target. "That one," he said casually. "Anyone ever tried that shot?" "It's extremely difficult," Morrison replied. "Wind conditions." "Of course," Blackwood interrupted, handing the rifle back. "Perhaps best left as theoretical. After all, we wouldn't want to embarrass anyone." The words hung there, sharp. Mocking. Nina froze mid-step, brass casing still in her hand. In Afghanistan, she'd learned to ignore the insults, the sideways looks, the whispers about quota promotions or female snipers. But this wasn't a whisper. It was a challenge dressed as civility. Something in her chest snapped back into place. She set down her bucket and walked toward the firing line. 18 faces turned her way. Confusion, disbelief, a few smirks. "Excuse me, sir," she said, addressing Colonel Morrison. Her voice was calm, steady, controlled. "Castillo, what the hell are you doing?" Sergeant Webb hissed from behind her. But Morrison lifted a hand. He'd read her file once, he remembered. "What is it, Staff Sergeant?" "I'd like to attempt the shot, sir, at 3,400 meters." Silence. A stillness so thick it seemed to swallow the wind. Blackwood turned to her with raised eyebrows. "I'm sorry," he said with polite disbelief. "Did the cleaning detail just volunteer for precision shooting?" Laughter rippled among the British officers. Nina didn't blink. "Staff Sergeant Nina Castillo, sir, 2 tour in Afghanistan, sniper qualified. Longest confirmed kill, 2,900 meters. The laughter stopped. The wind carried only dust and heat. Blackwood studied her with a faint smirk. "You think you can hit 3,400 with a rifle you haven't zeroed, in conditions you haven't studied, after spending the morning collecting brass?" "I'd like to try, sir." Colonel Morrison looked uneasy. "Major, if you have no objections." "None at all," Blackwood said smoothly. "Though perhaps we should make this interesting. If she misses, she continues her current duties without complaint. But if she hits," he smiled faintly, "I'll offer my personal apology." "And if she hits center mass?" Morrison asked. "Then I'll recommend her for the Queen's Medal for marksmanship. Not that it'll be necessary." "I accept those terms," Nina said quietly. From the sidelines, an older man stepped forward, white hair, calm eyes that had seen too much. Master Sergeant James "Ghost" Sullivan. He'd trained half the snipers in the division, a legend in his own right. "You sure about this, Castillo?" he asked softly. "Yes, Master Sergeant." He studied her face, then smiled faintly. "You remind me of your father, same look in the eyes." She froze. "You knew my father?" Sullivan nodded. "Diego Castillo. We served together in SEAL Team 4. Best shot I ever knew until now." He leaned closer. "This is your moment. Show them what a Castillo can do." Nina felt her throat tighten. For a second the world blurred, not from nerves but from something older. Pride, pain, memory. She stepped to the line. The same rifle Blackwood had used, an M24, standard issue. Not ideal for this range, but she didn't care. She liked impossible odds. They made her sharper. She knelt, set the bipod, and settled the stock into her shoulder. The metal felt heavier than it should. Her left arm burned. The pain was real, grounding. "Problem, Staff Sergeant?" Blackwood asked with a smirk. "No, sir, just getting comfortable." She took in the wind. The flags on the range flicked lazily at first, then changed direction halfway downrange. Typical mountain wind, unpredictable. She tracked it visually, noting the shimmer of heat rising off the dirt, the way the grass bent differently at 1,000 and 2,000 meters. "Whenever you're ready," Blackwood said. "We don't have all day." She ignored him, her breathing slowed. One inhale. Half exhale. Hold. The world narrowed, the range, the wind, her pulse. Everything else dissolved. Her father's voice echoed from memory. The rifle's just a tool, Mija. The weapon is the heart behind it. She adjusted her aim 2 clicks left for wind drift, 1 for elevation. Poor girl doesn't know what she's gotten herself into, one of the Brits whispered. Any time now, Staff Sergeant, Blackwood said again, louder. Or would you like me to fetch your cleaning bucket? Nina's finger tightened on the trigger. No response, no anger, just focus. Her heart rate slowed to 60 beats per minute. Her breathing matched it. Slow, measured, still. She squeezed. The rifle kicked. A thunderclap rolled across the mountains. The bullet vanished into distance. 4 seconds of silence stretched into eternity. 4 seconds where no one breathed. Then, I don't see an impact, one of the spotters said nervously. Blackwood's smirk returned. As I expected, no shame in trying, Staff Sergeant. Nina didn't move, her eyes still in the scope. Her pulse steady. Something told her she'd hit it. She couldn't explain it, snipers always know. Colonel Morrison stepped forward. We'll need to confirm, get a vehicle. Engine started, soldiers moved, dust rose. Nina stood slowly, her hands trembling only after the rifle was down. Sullivan gave her a small nod. Whatever happens out there, your father would have been proud. She didn't answer, just watched the Humvees rumble toward the distant hillside where her bullet had gone. Where her reputation, her redemption, might be waiting. The range fell silent again. Only the sound of wind moving over the brass she'd left behind. She exhaled once, a whisper against the emptiness. Let's see if luck ever had anything to do with it. The convoy crawled across the barren range, tires crunching over gravel and sun-baked earth. Inside the lead Humvee, Nina Castillo sat in silence, hands folded on her lap. Her palms were damp, though her face betrayed nothing. Every bump in the dirt road made her shoulder throb, a sharp reminder of Afghanistan, of the blast, of what she'd lost. But pain was useful, it kept her anchored. No one spoke. Even the British officers had gone quiet. Blackwood sat in the front passenger seat, expression unreadable. The others watched her through the reflection in the glass, curious, skeptical, waiting to see if the myth of her 2,900-meter shot had been just that. 20 minutes later, the vehicles came to a stop. The 3,400-meter target stood alone on the hillside, a metal silhouette, scarred from years of stray rounds and mountain wind. Nina stepped out, the dry air biting her lungs. The smell of oil, dust, and gunmetal mixed with something deeper, tension, the kind that felt alive. Blackwood reached the target first. His posture was casual, but his eyes were sharp, scanning every inch of the steel plate. Then he froze. There, half an inch left of center, was a fresh bullet hole, clean, perfect, and impossible to mistake. For a long, quiet moment, no one said a word. Then one of the American officers whispered, "Holy hell." Another leaned in closer, squinting. That's not luck, that's physics obeying faith. Blackwood crouched, running a gloved hand over the impact point. The edges of the hole were still warm. He looked up slowly, his jaw tightening. "Impressive," he said finally, voice flat. "A hit at that range is noteworthy." But his tone made the word sound like an insult. Colonel Morrison stepped forward, pride creeping into his voice. "Center mass, Major." Blackwood's lips curved in a faint, joyless smile. Hardly, slightly left, but yes, commendable, perhaps even admirable. The spotter, still scanning through his scope, spoke up. "Given the wind drift, sir, that placement is center mass. The round compensated perfectly for crosswind. It's as close to perfect as you can get at that distance." Nina didn't smile. She simply looked at the target, her heartbeat steady now. The kind of steady that only comes after you've stared down the impossible and made it blink first. Blackwood straightened, brushing dust from his sleeve. Well, congratulations, Staff Sergeant. A remarkable demonstration of persistence. Thank you, sir. Of course, he added smoothly. Even a blind squirrel finds a nut now and then. The comment hung between them like a tripwire. But Nina didn't react. She learned long ago that dignity spoke louder than anger ever could. When they rode back to base, no one said much. The air was thick with unspoken words, some of admiration, others of resentment. Blackwood stared out the window, jaw set, the mountain sunlight painting sharp edges across his face. In the reflection, Nina watched him. She didn't know what game he was playing, but she knew the look in his eyes, the look of a man who didn't like losing, especially not to a woman who'd been written off as broken. Back at Fort Carson, the story spread faster than any radio transmission. By the time the convoy returned, half the base already knew. A wounded soldier on cleanup duty had outshot Britain's best. They called it the 3,400 miracle. Nina called it Tuesday. That evening in the mess hall, soldiers gave her respectful nods as she passed. Some even clapped. She hated that, not the respect, the attention. It felt like standing under a spotlight she hadn't asked for. At her table, Sergeant Webb appeared with a tray and a cautious grin. "Mind if I sit?" "Free country," she said. He lowered himself into the chair. "Hell of a shot, Castillo. 16 years in, I've never seen anyone make a range go silent like that." Nina poked at her food. "Appreciate it, Sergeant." He studied her for a moment, then sighed. "You know, I misjudged you. When they assigned you to my detail, I figured you were just another injury the system didn't know what to do with. I was wrong." She met his eyes. "You weren't wrong, Sergeant, you were just early." He chuckled. "Well, whether you like it or not, you're the talk of the base now. Even Morrison's bragging to the Brits." "Let him. Maybe they'll forget it by next week." "Not likely." Webb leaned in slightly. "That British Major Blackwood, he's been asking about you, digging through your record, your medical file, everything. You got his attention." Nina's fork froze midair. "Why?" "Wish I knew." Before she could answer, the mess hall went quiet. The kind of quiet that sweeps through a room before something significant happens. Major Blackwood had entered, flanked by 2 British officers. His boots clicked on the tile floor, sharp, deliberate. Every soldier's gaze followed him. He scanned the room until his eyes found her. "Staff Sergeant Castillo," he said evenly, "a word." The conversation around them died completely. Nina stood, her tray untouched, and followed him to a quiet corner near the exit. Up close, his arrogance had softened into something else. Not humility, curiosity, calculation. "That was quite a performance today," he said. "It wasn't a performance, sir," Nina replied. "It was just shooting." He smiled faintly. "Just shooting," he repeated, almost amused. "Tell me, Staff Sergeant, do you know what the longest confirmed kill in military history is?" "Canadian JTF-2, 3,650 meters, Iraq, 2017. "Correct." His eyes glittered. "Your shot today was within 300 meters of that. Not a kill, of course, but extraordinary nonetheless, under suboptimal conditions." Nina didn't respond. She didn't like where this was going. "I've been speaking with your Colonel Morrison," he continued, tone light but pointed. "It seems the American military has a rather unique way of mismanaging its talent." "I serve where I'm assigned, sir." "Admirable loyalty," he said. "Rare these days, but tell me, does loyalty comfort you when your talents rust away in obscurity?" Nina's jaw tightened. "Was there something you needed, Major?" Blackwood's smile widened just slightly, a predator scenting interest. "Yes, I have a proposition." He leaned closer, lowering his voice. "Next month, the British Army is hosting an international sniper competition at our training facility in Scotland. 14 nations, the best marksmen in the world. I happen to have some influence in the selection process." She frowned and, "I'd like to see you there, representing your country, prove that what happened today wasn't luck." For a heartbeat, she didn't breathe. Represent her country again. Hold a rifle, not a broom. Be seen again, not as the wounded soldier collecting brass, but as a warrior. But beneath the flicker of hope, something darker stirred. "Why me, sir, after the way you spoke to me today?" Blackwood chuckled softly. "Because you surprised me, and I don't like surprises. I intend to understand them." He straightened, his tone turning almost diplomatic. "Colonel Morrison's already agreed to endorse your temporary reassignment. I'll need your answer by tomorrow evening." Then he turned and left, leaving her standing in the hum of the fluorescent lights. When she returned to her table, Webb raised an eyebrow. "So, what did the Brit want?" She told him, the competition, the invitation, the strange compliment disguised as a challenge. Webb listened quietly, then sighed. "Castillo, that's one hell of an opportunity, but something about that guy, I don't like it. He's too smooth." "I don't trust him either," Nina said, "but it's a chance, maybe my only one." "Just be careful. Men like that don't help without a reason." That night in her barracks, sleep didn't come easy. The desert wind outside howled softly through the vents, like distant gunfire. She lay awake, staring at the ceiling, her shoulder aching in rhythm with her heartbeat. She thought of her father, Diego Castillo, and the notebook he'd left her before he died. "My sniper journal," he'd called it, "things they don't teach in the manuals." His handwriting had been firm, deliberate. Notes about wind calls, ballistics, breathing cycles, but also lines she never understood until years later. The shot isn't about distance, it's about purpose. When you lose your purpose, every shot misses, even the perfect ones. She turned her head toward the small metal locker by her bunk. Inside, under her folded uniforms, lay that same notebook. She hadn't opened it since Afghanistan, since before the blast. Now her fingers itched too. By morning, her decision was made. She found Master Sergeant Sullivan at the sniper facility, training a handful of young recruits. The man still moved like a ghost, quiet, deliberate, precise. When he saw her, he dismissed his students with a nod. "Staff Sergeant Castillo," he said formally, though his eyes softened. "What can I do for you?" "I need a word, sir, in private." He led her into a small office lined with old photos, soldiers from a dozen wars, black and white faces with thousand-yard stares. Once the door closed, his tone changed. "You've been reading your father's journal, haven't you?" She blinked. "How did you?" "You've got the same look he used to have, that face he made when he was wrestling with a decision." "You knew him," she said quietly. "You served with him." Sullivan nodded, sinking into a chair. "Desert Storm, SEAL Team 4, shared a sniper hide for 35 days. Your old man was the best shot I ever saw, until you." A silence settled between them, heavy, respectful, almost sacred. Finally he said, "So, Blackwood's offer." "You heard." Word travels fast when a British SAS major takes sudden interest in one of ours. "What do you know about him?" she asked. Sullivan's eyes darkened. "Enough to know he's dangerous, smart, political. He's been involved in operations that never made it to the reports, and every time he shows up, something goes missing: people, records, sometimes entire missions." Nina frowned. "You think this competition is a cover for something?" "I think Blackwood doesn't do anything without an angle, and if he's pulling you in, there's a reason. You just don't see it yet." She exhaled slowly, staring at the wall of old photos. "He mentioned my father, too, said something about honoring his memory." Sullivan's expression didn't change, but his voice dropped to a near whisper. "That's what worries me." "Why?" He looked at her then, really looked. "Because your father's death wasn't as simple as the reports claimed, and if Blackwood's bringing up his name, Then someone's been digging in graves best left undisturbed. Nina's pulse quickened. What are you saying? Sullivan hesitated. I'm saying, if you go to Scotland, you won't just be representing your country. You'll be stepping into the same shadows that killed your father. He leaned back, eyes narrowing. So before you say yes, ask yourself what you're really trying to hit, a target or the truth. What drives a person to step back into the fire they barely survived? Pride, duty, or something far more personal, like needing answers no one else dares to ask. Nina Castillo stared at the orders on her cot, the morning light cutting through the barracks window. The paper trembled slightly in her hand, not from fear, but from what came with it. Temporary assignment. International Precision Sniper Invitational Glencoroe Training Facility, Scotland. Reporting in 10 days. It was official. She was going back into the field. She folded the document neatly, slipped it into her jacket, and exhaled. The barracks around her were quiet. Outside, a cold wind whispered through the pines. For the first time in months, she felt something that resembled purpose. And yet under it all, Sullivan's warning still echoed. If you go to Scotland, you'll be stepping into the same shadows that killed your father. She tried to bury those words all week. They refused to stay buried. The C-17 transport droned over the Atlantic, gray wings slicing through the clouds. Nina sat near the rear, headphones in but no music playing. The hum of the engines was enough. Across the aisle, British soldiers chatted in low tones. She recognized one, Captain Ellis Ford, Blackwood's second in command. He'd been polite when they met at Fort Carson. Too polite. The kind of man who measured people before speaking to them. When he noticed her glance, he nodded politely. Nervous about Scotland, Staff Sergeant. No, she said, just thinking. About the competition. About what comes after. Ford smiled faintly. You sound like someone who already knows she's going to win. She didn't reply. He didn't expect her to. Scotland greeted her with gray skis and wind that smelled of salt and heather. Glencoroe Training Facility sat in the middle of nowhere. Mist-covered hills, an old airfield converted into barracks, and a firing range that stretched farther than the eye could see. Nina stepped off the transport and took it in. Everything about the place felt clinical, clean, controlled. Like a place built for skill, not soul. Major Blackwood was waiting, his uniform immaculate, his smile practiced. Staff Sergeant Castillo, he greeted, voice clipped as ever. Welcome to Glencoroe. You'll find the weather less forgiving than Colorado, but the company more interesting. She saluted crisply. Thank you, sir. Follow me. Your quarters are this way. They walked across the tarmac. Around them, soldiers from different nations milled about, Canadians, Australians, Poles, even a few Israelis. The air buzzed with quiet competition. Men who'd spent their lives being the best now found themselves in a room full of equals, and one American woman who'd already embarrassed a legend. Blackwood led her into a large briefing hall. Inside, long tables were lined with rifles, scopes, range charts, and computers tracking wind vectors. This, Blackwood announced, is where you'll be spending the next 2 weeks. Our goal is to find not just the best marksman but the most disciplined. Every variable will be tested: endurance, wind correction, target acquisition, and psychological pressure. He turned toward her, his gaze steady. You thrive under pressure, don't you, Staff Sergeant? She met his eyes. Pressure clarifies things, sir. Good, he said, smiling faintly. Let's hope you like clarity. Her assigned barracks were smaller than Fort Carson's, colder too. The walls smelled faintly of oil and damp metal. On the narrow desk beside her bunk sat a sealed envelope with her name on it. No sender, no insignia, just her name. Inside, a single sheet of paper. He didn't die in Iraq, he was silenced. Her heart stopped. Below the message, a small, faded photo. Her father, Diego Castillo, in desert fatigues, arm around another soldier. The other man was younger, his face hidden by a shadow. On the back of the photo, scrawled in rough handwriting, "Find the one he trusted, J.S." She turned it over again, J.S. James Sullivan. The next morning, the competition began. Dozens of shooters lined up along the range, each one representing a nation. The air was sharp with anticipation and the acrid smell of gun oil. Blackwood stood at the observation deck with several officers. His voice carried over the field like a commandment. Competitors will engage 10 targets at increasing distances, from 600 to 2,800 meters. Wind variable, elevation adjusted. You'll have 30 seconds between targets. Miss 3 times and you're out. A murmur rippled through the crowd. 30 seconds was brutal, almost impossible. Nina slid her bolt open, checked the chamber, and lowered into position. Her rifle, a custom-built Accuracy International AXMC, gleamed under the pale Scottish sun. It felt right in her hands, balanced, lethal. The first target dropped, 600 meters. She exhaled once, squeezed the trigger, impact. Then 1,000, impact. 1,600, wind shifted, she compensated, impact. As the range extended, her focus narrowed. Every breath, every flicker of movement around her disappeared. The world was a single thread of precision and rhythm. She hit all 10 targets. Not one miss. When she rose from prone, murmurs spread among the competitors. The Canadians whispered to each other. The Polish team exchanged knowing glances. Even Blackwood, watching from above, gave a small, reluctant nod. But Nina didn't feel pride, not yet. Something about the entire setup felt too rehearsed, too orchestrated, like a stage where the script had already been written. Later that evening, as she cleaned her rifle, a shadow appeared in the doorway. "Captain Ford." "May I?" he asked, stepping inside. "Sure." He looked around the small room, hands behind his back. "You shoot like someone who doesn't believe in second chances." "I don't." He smiled faintly. "That's what Blackwood likes about you." "Is that what he told you?" "That's what he tells everyone. But he doesn't like anyone, not really. He studies them." Nina looked up. "Studies them for what?" Ford hesitated. "You didn't hear this from me, but these competitions, they're not always just about shooting. Sometimes they're about recruitment." "Recruitment?" He nodded. "Private sector contracts, off-books operations. Blackwood's been building something, a network of elite shooters. No flags, no oversight, just results." Nina's stomach tightened. "Mercenaries?" Ford shrugged. "Depends on your definition of patriotism." "And you?" "I'm a soldier," he said quietly. "But some wars aren't fought on paper anymore. You might want to remember that before this is over." He turned to leave, then paused. "Whatever you do, watch your back, Staff Sergeant. This place has ghosts." When he was gone, Nina stared at the half-cleaned rifle in front of her, her pulse still steady but her mind racing. "Ghosts?" She reached into her pocket and pulled out the photo again, her father's arm around that shadowed man. J.S. Was Sullivan part of this? Was Blackwood? And what did any of it have to do with her father's death? The next few days blurred into repetition. Targets, wind calls, isolation drills. The competition thinned, shooters dropped out under pressure, but Nina remained, steady as gravity. At night she'd lie awake, listening to the wind batter the metal roof. Her dreams were sharp, fragmented, her father's voice overlapping with the echo of gunfire. Sometimes she'd wake up reaching for a weapon that wasn't there. One night near the end of the second week, she heard footsteps outside her barracks, slow, deliberate. She reached for the sidearm under her bunk, empty. It wasn't regulation to keep it loaded during training. The door handle turned, then stopped. She waited. Nothing. A minute later, the footsteps receded. When she checked outside, the hallway was empty, except for a folded envelope on the floor. Inside, a single bullet casing. Polished perfect. And etched into the brass with a knife tip, 3 letters, SAS. She stared at it, the cold metal pressing into her palm. Someone was sending a message. But was it a warning or a threat? The next morning, Blackwood called her to his office. The room was sparse, maps on the walls, a single window overlooking the range. He gestured for her to sit. "You've done well, Staff Sergeant," he said, voice measured. "Better than I expected." "Thank you, sir. But talent without loyalty is wasted. I hope you understand that." "I understand loyalty," she said. "It's why I'm here." He smiled faintly. "Is it? Or are you here to prove something? Perhaps to someone who isn't even alive anymore?" Her breath caught. "You know about my father." "I know of him. Diego Castillo was a remarkable man, brilliant marksman. Shame how it ended." "You said he was silenced." Blackwood leaned back, folding his hands. "Did I?" Her jaw tightened. "You sent me a message." He frowned. "I sent you nothing." The silence stretched. She could feel his gaze cutting through her, weighing every flicker of reaction. Finally he said softly, "You remind me of him, same eyes, same anger." Then almost gently, "Be careful with that anger, Staff Sergeant. It makes you predictable." He turned back to his papers, signaling the conversation was over. Nina stood, her pulse hammering in her throat. At the door she stopped. "If this competition's about recruitment, sir, you're wasting your time. I don't work for men who play games with the dead." For the first time, Blackwood's smile vanished. "Everyone works for someone, Staff Sergeant. The only question is whether you choose or are chosen." She left without saluting. Outside, the wind howled across the highlands, cold and sharp. Clouds rolled low over the hills, heavy with rain. She tightened her jacket and looked toward the range, toward the targets waiting in the mist. Something was happening here. Something her father had been part of. And whatever it was, she was now standing dead center in its crosshairs. What happens when the mission you're given isn't the mission you're fighting for? The wind screamed across the highlands that morning, turning the Glencoro Range into a battlefield of invisible forces. Flags whipped, grass bent. The cold bit through layers of fabric. It was the final phase of the competition, long-range elimination. 10 shooters left, 1 bullet each, closest to center wins. But Nina Castillo wasn't thinking about trophies, not anymore. Her mind was back in Colorado, the photograph, the message, Sullivan's warning. Her father's face, half faded by time, kept flashing in her memory. He didn't die in Iraq, he was silenced. Every time she closed her eyes, she saw it. Every time she opened them, she felt watched. Major Blackwood stood at the observation platform, hands clasped behind his back. The wind tugged at his coat, but he looked completely at ease, like a conductor in front of an orchestra that didn't yet know it was playing his symphony. "Competitors," his voice carried over the range, calm and cold. "Today's test will decide more than ranking. It will reveal who among you understands the difference between instinct and intent." The shooters adjusted their rifles. Rain misted the air, soft, fine, relentless. Nina lay prone behind her rifle, checking the scope. The air density, the humidity, even the temperature mattered now. The bullet's flight would shift subtly over this distance. She could feel it, a living connection between her heartbeat and the pull of the trigger. But something wasn't right. As she looked down the line of competitors, she noticed the British team's gear. Different setups, different spotters, different radios. She frowned. Radios weren't standard for this stage. All communications were supposed to be line of sight. "Target 1 ready," the range officer called. Blackwood raised a gloved hand. "Begin." Shots cracked like thunder, one after another. When it was her turn, Nina exhaled slowly, adjusting for crosswind. The shot broke clean, the rifle's recoil smooth, her shoulder absorbing the shock. Through the scope, she saw the target shift slightly, a hit. Clean, precise. Applause rippled faintly behind her. Someone muttered, "Bloody hell, she did it again." But even as she stood, her focus stayed on Blackwood. He wasn't clapping. He was speaking quietly into an earpiece, expression unreadable. That evening, after the range cleared, she found Captain Ford sitting alone in the mess hall, a cup of black tea untouched in front of him. "Mind if I join you?" she asked. He gestured to the chair opposite. "You don't strike me as the tea type." "I'm not," she said, "but I have questions." He smiled faintly. "You always do. You said these competitions are for recruitment. What kind of operations?" He hesitated, fingers drumming the table. "Off the books. No insignia, no oversight. We call it the consortium. Technically, it doesn't exist. Blackwood runs it. He's one of them. There are others, ex-intelligence, private contractors, even a few Americans. Doing what? Whatever they're paid to do. Target eliminations, political disruptions. Sometimes cleanup jobs." Nina's pulse hardened. "Cleanup." Ford looked up, eyes narrowing. "You think your father's death was an accident?" She froze. He leaned closer. "Diego Castillo wasn't killed in combat. He was executed during a black operation gone wrong. Someone needed a scapegoat, someone who wouldn't be missed." "Who?" "I don't know, but I do know Blackwood was there. Same theater, same mission window." The mess hall seemed to shrink around her. The hum of the refrigerators, the rain tapping on the metal roof, every sound amplified. Ford's voice dropped. "Whatever you do, don't confront him alone." "Why are you telling me this?" He sighed. "Because I've been in too long to believe in heroes, but I still believe in justice." She looked at him carefully. "You trust me?" "I trust your aim," he said quietly. "Just make sure when you pull the trigger, you know who deserves it." 2 nights later, the rain came harder, the kind of Scottish storm that blurred the line between sky and earth. Nina couldn't sleep. She sat on her bunk, cleaning her rifle, the rhythmic click of metal on cloth echoing through the dark. Then the lights flickered. Once, twice, then out. A blackout. Footsteps outside, 2 pairs. She grabbed her sidearm, slid toward the door. Her pulse slowed automatically, years of training taking over. The door creaked open slightly, a whisper of movement. She counted the steps. 1, 2, pause. She pivoted low and aimed. "Move another inch and I'll put a hole through the door." A voice whispered back, urgent, "It's me, Ford." She lowered the gun just a little. "You shouldn't be here." He stepped inside, soaked to the bone, face pale. "You need to see this." He handed her a flash drive, the casing scratched and worn. Pulled it from the range computer. Blackwood's been running secondary data streams, encrypted files, not part of the competition. "What's on it?" "I only saw fragments, old mission logs, your father's name in there." Her chest tightened. "From Desert Storm." Ford shook his head slowly. "From Afghanistan, 2008. "That's impossible. He was dead by then." "According to public record, yes, but these files say otherwise. Someone kept him off the books for years." Before she could respond, a sharp crack split the air outside. A rifle shot. Ford staggered, his body jerking once. Blood bloomed across his chest. "Ford," she caught him as he fell, dragging him inside, slamming the door. Another shot punched through the metal, inches from her shoulder. "Sniper," he gasped, clutching at his side. "It's him." "Blackwood." He didn't answer. His breathing came shallow, ragged. The flash drive slipped from his hand, clattering onto the floor. She pressed her hand to his wound. "Stay with me." But his eyes had already gone distant. He was gone before the next thunder rolled. Outside, footsteps. Fast, coordinated. She grabbed her rifle and the flash drive, bolting through the back door. Rain hammered down, masking her movement. The camp lights flickered, dimmed, then died again. Someone had cut power. The base was suddenly a maze of shadows. She ducked between hangars, every sense alive. Her shoulder throbbed. Her breath came cold and sharp. Then she saw him, Blackwood, standing under the floodlights near the command hut, speaking into a radio. Behind him, two men loaded a black case into a vehicle. He turned his head slightly, as if sensing her. Even from 50 yards away, his eyes found her through the dark. For a moment, neither moved. Just rain, wind, silence. Then he smiled, a small knowing smile. And the headlights flared to life. By the time she raised her rifle, the vehicle was gone, swallowed by the storm. Hours later, soldiers searched the compound. The official report called it an accident, unauthorized live fire incident. No shooter identified. Ford's body was taken away under a tarp. His name never appeared in the logs. Nina stood in the rain long after they left. Her uniform clung to her like armor she couldn't shed. The flash drive was hidden in her boot, the only proof she had left. The next morning she went to the range early before anyone else. The sky was still gray, the earth still soaked. She needed to think, to breathe. She lay down behind a rifle, sighted the distant target, 2,900 meters, the same distance as her father's last confirmed shot. She imagined him there beside her, same calm voice, same hand on her shoulder. Trust the wind, trust yourself. She exhaled, finger resting on the trigger. But she wasn't aiming at steel. She was aiming at ghosts. Her father's face, Ford's, every soldier silenced for knowing too much. The shot cracked, echoing across the range, and something in her broke with it. She lowered the rifle, her breath shaking. Her father's words drifted back like a whisper in the storm. The rifle doesn't lie, Mija, people do. Later that day, Blackwood called an emergency briefing. He stood before the remaining competitors, his tone grave. Last night, we lost one of our own. Captain Ellis Ford was killed during a training mishap. We honor his service and sacrifice. Nina's hands clenched at her sides. Mishap. He said it like a weather report. As a result, he continued, the final evaluation will proceed under modified conditions. Real-world simulation, night engagement, teams of 2. The shooters murmured in confusion. Blackwood's eyes found hers. Staff Sergeant Castillo, you'll be paired with me. Her pulse skipped. Sir, I. Objection noted, he cut in smoothly. We deploy at 2300 hours. She stared at him, realizing this wasn't an order, it was bait. He wanted her close. To watch her, or to silence her next. Sullivan's voice echoed in her mind. If you go to Scotland, you'll be stepping into the same shadows that killed your father. She didn't reply, didn't salute. Just turned and walked out. Outside, the clouds split, and a thin beam of sunlight broke through the storm, cutting across the field like a spotlight on fate. The competition was over. The hunt had begun. What do you do when the enemy's standing across from you? Where's your own uniform? The Scottish night was a living thing, cold, heavy, and alive with mist. Clouds hung low over the highlands, swallowing sound, muffling breath. The range was silent now, save for the whisper of wind through wet grass. Nina Castillo sat in the armory, checking her rifle by the faint yellow light. Every click, every metallic slide was deliberate, measured. Across the room, Major Blackwood watched her. He didn't speak, didn't smile. The announcement of their pairing had spread through the camp like wildfire. The Americans whispered that it was a setup. The Brits pretended it was. But everyone knew, when Blackwood picked his partner, it wasn't for teamwork, it was for control. He finally broke the silence. "You've been quiet, Staff Sergeant." "Thinking, sir." "About." She looked up, her voice flat. "About how a man gets shot in the middle of a secure base, and somehow it's called a training mishap." Blackwood's expression didn't change. "You're suggesting foul play." "I'm suggesting you know more than you're saying." He chuckled softly. "Careful, Castillo. Conspiracy theories are unbecoming of a soldier. So is lying to one." Their eyes locked steel on flint. Then he stood, straightened his jacket, and gestured to the door. "Time to move." They rode in silence through the dark. A military truck crawled along the dirt track, its headlights dimmed. Inside, the air smelled of wet canvas and oil. Nina sat across from Blackwood, rifle resting between her knees. She could see his reflection in the window, calm, unbothered, like a man who'd already decided the outcome. The simulation briefing had been vague: recon and eliminate mock targets in a controlled combat zone, but nothing about it felt like training. No instructors, no observers. Only live ammunition and encrypted radios. When the truck stopped, the driver said nothing, just tapped the dashboard twice and drove away into the dark. They were alone. The fog was thick here, almost blinding. Their headlamps cut pale tunnels through it, revealing twisted trees and patches of bog. Nina adjusted her scope, scanning ahead. "What's the objective, sir?" Blackwood's voice came calm and low. "Simple. Locate target marker Alpha, confirm distance, engage if hostile." "And if it's not?" He smiled faintly. "Everything's hostile in the right context." They moved uphill, boots sinking into mud. The mist swallowed the sound of their steps, the night closing around them like a slow exhale. At the ridge, Blackwood raised his hand, signal to stop. He crouched, scanning the valley below through his scope. "There," he whispered. A faint light flickered miles away, barely visible through the fog. Nina adjusted her lens, focusing. The glow was steady like a campfire, but beside it, movement. 3 figures, armed. She frowned. "They're not competitors." "No," Blackwood said softly. "They're the target." Her pulse slowed. This was supposed to be an exercise. He didn't answer. "Those are live hostiles," she said. "Who are they?" Blackwood's jaw tightened. "You're asking too many questions." "Answer one, then." He turned, eyes cold. "Orders don't always come with explanations. You should know that. Not when the orders come with body bags." For a moment neither spoke. The fog coiled around them, thick as smoke. Then he said quietly, "Engage, Staff Sergeant. That's an order." Her hand stayed steady on the rifle, but her heart hammered. "Sir, with respect, I'm not firing on unidentified personnel." He looked at her, unimpressed. "Your father said the same thing once." The words hit harder than any bullet. "What did you say?" "Afghanistan 2008, he said softly. Operation Headhunter, classified Black Op. He refused an order, questioned the mission parameters, called it murder. A week later, he was dead." Nina's throat went dry. "You were there." He didn't deny it. "You killed him." "I executed protocol," Blackwood said calmly. "He compromised the operation, and you, of all people, should know hesitation costs lives." She stared at him, disbelief twisting into rage. "You murdered an American soldier and called it duty." "Your father was a good man," Blackwood said, voice calm as winter. "But good men don't survive long in the real world. He made it personal. He made it messy." She gripped her rifle tighter. "What was the mission?" His smile was small, empty. "Same as this one. Remove liabilities." Her finger hovered near the trigger. "You're saying I'm the liability." He didn't need to answer. The silence was enough. Then movement in the fog. A shadow shifted near the valley below. One of the armed men raised a flashlight. And before Nina could react, Blackwood fired. The rifle thundered. The man dropped. "Target down," he said into his radio. The response came back through static. "Confirm elimination. Proceed to beta." Nina's pulse roared in her ears. "Who are you working for?" "Same people your father tried to expose." He turned to her, eyes like glass. "And the same people who don't tolerate unfinished business." She moved before he did. The rifle swung up, barrel steady. "Don't," she said. But Blackwood didn't flinch. "You're not going to shoot me, Castillo. You want the truth too badly." "Then talk." He tilted his head slightly. "The truth? Your father was part of the same program you think you hate, a deep black initiative sanctioned by both governments, targeted kills to maintain balance. He wanted out. He wanted to expose it, so they sent me." Nina's stomach twisted. "Don't you see?" he continued, voice calm, persuasive. "You were raised in the image of a killer built by the system, the daughter of a man who couldn't handle the cost of his own precision. You think that excuses what you did. I don't need excuses. I have results." He turned slightly, lowering his weapon. "Come with me, Castillo. You don't belong in their ranks anymore. I can offer you more than medals and pity. I can offer you purpose." She stared at him, the man who'd murdered her father, the man who had turned this competition into a cover for something darker. For a heartbeat, she almost laughed. "Purpose," she said softly. "You wouldn't know what that word means if it stared down your scope." Then she fired. The recoil slammed into her shoulder. Blackwood fell backward, blood blooming through his coat. But he wasn't dead. He laughed, a low, pained sound. "Good shot," he said. "Your father would have been proud." Then he rolled, vanishing into the fog. By the time she reached the spot, he was gone, only blood on the wet grass, leading downhill into darkness. She moved through the fog, tracking him. Every instinct screamed trap, but rage burned through reason. Down in the valley, the mist cleared enough for her to see the flickering campfire again. The other targets lay motionless, all dead. Clean kills, double taps. Whoever they were, they hadn't even drawn their weapons. She knelt beside one of them, rolling the body gently. No uniform insignia, no tags. But the face. Her breath caught. He wasn't a soldier. He was a technician, a civilian. And stitched on the inside of his jacket pocket was a patch she recognized instantly. U.S. Department of Defense Cyber Division. This wasn't a live-fire drill. It was an execution. And she'd been meant to clean it up. Her radio crackled suddenly. "Castillo." Blackwood's voice, calm, amused. "Impressive. I didn't think you'd actually pull the trigger." "Where are you?" "Closer than you think." She spun, scanning the mist. "You've got one chance," she said. "Come out, or I finish what I started." He laughed. "That's what your father said too." A shot cracked. The dirt exploded beside her boot. She dove, rolled, fired back, but the fog swallowed everything. Another shot, closer this time. The bullet whined past her ear. He was hunting her now. The chase lasted minutes that felt like hours. The fog turned every sound into deception, every shadow into threat. At last she slid behind a rock outcrop, catching her breath. Her shoulder burned, muscles trembling from the weight of her rifle. Then a voice, low and close. "You can't win, Castillo." She turned, rifle ready. "You talk too much for a ghost." Another laugh. "Your father said the same thing, right before he begged me not to make you an orphan." That did it. She fired once, twice. The fog lit up with muzzle flash, his and hers. When it cleared, silence. Then the sound of retreating steps. She didn't chase. Not this time. Not with the truth bleeding into the soil around her. Instead, she slung her rifle, knelt beside the dead civilians, and whispered, "I'm sorry." By dawn, the storm had passed. The range was quiet again. Blackwood was gone. So was his radio frequency. When Nina returned to camp, soldiers were already packing up. The competition had been abruptly canceled. Official explanation: weather-related termination. Of course. She kept her face unreadable as she walked past the others. Inside her barracks, she locked the door, pulled the flash drive from her boot, and slid it into her laptop. Encrypted files, dozens of them. Dates, coordinates, names. One folder marked Project Resolute. She clicked. Her father's photo filled the screen. Below it, his military file, classified, redacted. But one line at the bottom was Operation TRMNATD by MAJ SCBSTINBLACKWOOD confirmed. Her breath left her in a single, shaking exhale. It was all there, proof of the cover-up, proof of the lie. She stared at the words until they blurred, then whispered, "I'm coming for you." The wind outside howled, rattling the windows. She closed the laptop and looked at her reflection in the dark screen. She no longer looked like a soldier. She looked like what they'd made her father, a weapon finally remembering what it was built for. How do you come home when home doesn't feel real anymore? When every metal on the wall feels like a lie carved into metal. 2 weeks after Glencoro, Staff Sergeant Nina Castillo landed at Peterson Air Force Base under a false transfer order she'd written herself. No one questioned it. Soldiers rarely question ghosts returning from classified exercises. The Colorado air was thin and sharp. The Rockies looked the same, but she didn't. Her reflection in the terminal glass showed a soldier still standing straight, still breathing, just not believing. She drove north in silence, an unmarked Jeep eating up miles of highway. In her pocket, the flash drive waited like a live round. She'd memorized every file, every name, every operation. All roads led to one place, Project Resolute. And one man left alive, who could tell her what it really was. Master Sergeant James "Ghost" Sullivan. He lived off base now, tucked deep in the pines west of Colorado Springs. His cabin smelled of gun oil, coffee, and unfinished memories. When Nina knocked, he didn't open the door right away. When he did, his face didn't hide the shock. "I told you not to go," he said. "You also told me my father died clean." She stepped past him, set the flash drive on his table. Turns out he didn't. Sullivan stared at the drive like it was radioactive. "Where did you get this?" "Scotland, from a dead man who tried to warn me. Blackwood killed him too." He exhaled, slow and heavy. "You shouldn't have come here." "I didn't come for safety," she said. "I came for the truth." He poured 2 mugs of black coffee, the steam curling like smoke from an old battlefield. For a long time he said nothing, then quietly, "Your father and I were part of the same cell, unofficial, deniable. We took the shots politicians couldn't sign for. Project Resolute was the umbrella." What was it really doing? Sullivan rubbed his temples. At first, counterterror hits. Then it shifted. Private contracts started sliding in under NATO authorizations. Same funding, different signatures. Your father noticed. He tried to pull evidence, send it up the chain. And Blackwood. Sent to erase the leak. The words landed like a bullet without sound. "He trusted you," she said. "I tried to warn him," Sullivan whispered. "By the time I reached him, it was done. Diego died in a canyon outside Coast. They called it Crossfire, but the round that killed him was British issue." Nina closed her eyes. For a heartbeat she saw her father's grin, the tan lines around his eyes, the way he'd said Mija like it meant everything good in the world. Then the image burned away. "Why didn't you tell me?" "Because the truth doesn't set soldiers free," he said. "It just gives them new targets." She stood, jaw tight. "Then maybe that's what I need." Over the next days she lived like a ghost on base. Paperwork, silence, pretending to heal. At night she disappeared into the old sniper range, the one she used to clean. She rebuilt herself there. Every trigger pull was a heartbeat. Every exhale, a memory leaving her body. 300 yards. 800. 2,000. She shot until the pain in her shoulder blurred into rhythm. Sullivan watched from a distance sometimes, never speaking. One night he finally approached. "You planning to kill him?" "I'm planning to stop him." "You don't have authorization." She smiled without humor. "Neither did he when he killed my father." Sullivan looked at her for a long time. "You won't come back from it." "I already didn't." She needed proof that would survive her if she didn't. The flash drive was a start, but data alone could vanish. She needed voices. So she started calling old contacts, intel clerks, range techs, comms analysts who owed her favors. One by one, they connected fragments. Bank transfers tied to shell companies. Shipment logs moving weapons under humanitarian codes. And always the same authorization chain: Blackwood Consortium Group. It was bigger than her father's murder. It was an economy built on silence. 3 nights later, she found Sullivan on the porch, staring at the mountains. He held a small wooden box, carved with a seal insignia. "This belonged to Diego," he said. "I've kept it since Coast." Inside lay a compact rangefinder and a folded photo. Her father, younger, standing beside Sullivan, and another man she didn't recognize. The third face was British. "Blackwood," she whispered. "Back when he still pretended to wear honor," Sullivan said. "That's your proof, if you can make it reach the right eyes." "I'm not mailing it to a committee." He nodded once. "Then you better move fast, he'll know you're alive." He was right. The first sign came that same night. An unmarked SUV idling at the edge of the forest road, engine running with its lights off. When Nina stepped onto the porch with her rifle, it rolled away without headlights. The second sign was the message on her phone: "No caller ID." "You should have taken my offer, S." Blackwood was alive and watching. By morning she was gone. She left Sullivan a note: "Don't follow, don't protect me, just finish what's left if I fail." Then she drove east, cutting through dawn toward Washington, D.C. The plan was simple: deliver the files, expose the consortium, drag Blackwood into the light. But men like him didn't live in light. They built their empires in the dark corners between governments. Outside D.C., she met an old friend, Agent Layla Hughes, Defense Intelligence Liaison. They served together once in Kandahar. Hughes owed her her life. When she saw Nina, her jaw dropped. "Jesus, Castillo, you're supposed to be in medical rehab." Change of plans. She slid the drive across the cafe table. "You've got clearance. You can get this to someone who will listen." Hughes plugged it into a secured tablet, scrolling. Her face shifted from confusion to horror. "Where did you get this?" "From the man who murdered my father. This implicates half a dozen NATO liaisons, private contractors, even a senator." "Then burn them all," Nina said. "Just make sure it sees daylight." Hughes looked up, voice low. "You know they'll come for you." "They already have." Before Hughes could respond, Nina's phone buzzed again. Unknown number. One text: "You can't hide behind paperwork." She looked out the window. A black sedan sat across the street, 2 silhouettes inside. Nina stood. "You've got the files, do something real with them." Then she was gone, out the back door into the rain. She didn't go far. The sedan followed, predictable and patient. She led them south through back roads, winding into industrial lots near the Potomac. Finally she stopped beneath an overpass, killed the engine and waited. The sedan pulled up behind her. 2 men stepped out, dressed like contractors. No insignia, no names. One called out, "Staff Sergeant Castillo, Major Blackwood requests your cooperation." She smiled faintly, rolling her shoulder once. Tell him he should have requested my forgiveness. The first man reached for his weapon. The echo of her shot drowned the rest. The second hesitated long enough. 2 more rounds, silence. When it was done, she walked to the trunk of their car. Inside, satellite gear, encrypted radios, and a folder stamped Op Resolute Reclamation. They weren't here to capture her. They were here to erase her. By midnight, she was back in the cabin. Rain hammered the roof. Sullivan waited at the table, a revolver beside his coffee mug. They came, he said simply. They're not coming again, she replied. He nodded once. Then you know what happens next. I find him. You'll have to go where he hides. London may be deeper. He's got protection. Then I'll take it apart. He looked at her like a man who'd already buried too many soldiers. If you do this, there's no coming back to the flag. You'll be marked as rogue. She holstered her weapon. Maybe the flag needs reminding who it belongs to. Before dawn, she packed light. Rifle, suppressor, Diego's rangefinder, one photograph. Sullivan met her at the jeep. I can help, he said. You already did. She handed him an envelope. Inside were the backup drives and a single note. If I don't call in 72 hours, send this to Hughes. He nodded, eyes wet. You're your father's daughter. She gave a thin smile. He raised me to finish the shot. Then she drove off into the gray morning. The highway blurred into fog and memory. For the first time in months, she felt something close to peace. Not safety, not calm, but direction. Somewhere across an ocean, Sebastian Blackwood was rebuilding his network, wrapping himself in diplomacy and money. Somewhere in classified files, her father's name still carried the word terminated. And somewhere inside her chest, the quiet part of her heart whispered a single truth. This wasn't revenge anymore. It was correction. She reached over to the passenger seat, touched her father's old rangefinder, and whispered, Time to zero the wind, Pappy. What if the truth you've hunted your whole life turns out to be something you were never meant to survive? The jet descended through a bruised London sky, raindrops streaking across the cabin window like silent tracer rounds. Nina Castillo sat near the rear, hood pulled low, civilian clothes blending her into the crowd. Her eyes never left the clouds. It had been 4 days since Colorado. 3 since Sullivan's warning. 2 since she'd sent Agent Hughes the last encrypted data drop. And now one final mission. She didn't have official orders, didn't have backup. All she had was her father's rangefinder, a silenced rifle in a duffel bag, and the coordinates Sullivan had whispered before she left. West London, Docklands sector, look for a warehouse with no name. London at night was a storm of reflections, wet streets glowing with red lights, the air heavy with rain and exhaust. She moved like smoke, fatting between crowds and CCTV shadows. Every camera, every mirror she avoided by instinct. When she reached the riverfront, she found it an old warehouse, windows blacked out, a single camera sweeping the lot. Her instincts flared, military-grade optics, not security, surveillance. She circled wide, slipping through the service alleys behind it. The metal walls were silent, but the air carried faint hums, generators. Inside that warehouse, the consortium was alive. She waited until midnight before breaching. Rain masked her movement, wind covered her sound. A side door gave under pressure, old lock, new hinges. Inside, light spilled through cracks in the steel floor. Below it, an entire subterranean structure, rows of monitors, maps, and armed guards. The operation was bigger than she'd imagined, a nerve center for global resolutions. Every red dot on the screen represented an ongoing initiative, dozens of them. Private wars hiding behind peace treaties. And at the far end, overlooking it all, stood Major Sebastian Blackwood. Alive, whole, unapologetic. He looked older under the fluorescent light, a faint scar tracing his jawline where her bullet had grazed him. When he saw her, his smile was quiet, almost proud. I wondered when you'd find me. Nina raised her pistol. You should have wondered if I'd hesitate. He didn't move. You won't, not until you hear the rest. Save it, I read the files. Then you know half-truths at best. You think this was about greed, power. It was never that simple. She took a step closer. You murdered my father to keep your secret. He shook his head slowly. I executed protocol to protect stability. Stability, she hissed. You call blackmailing governments and assassinating whistleblowers stability. Control, Staff Sergeant. That's what peace really is. A balance of power maintained by those willing to do what the righteous won't. Her finger tightened on the trigger, and my father. He wanted to expose the project, to hand it to people who would have torn the world apart chasing truth. He gestured toward the screens. He didn't understand without shadows like this, your country, my country, they collapse under their own ideals. Nina's voice shook, not from fear but fury. He understood exactly. He just refused to become you. For the first time, Blackwood's composure cracked. You think you're different, he said. You've killed men for orders you never questioned. You've served wars you didn't start. You were born into this system. You are it. She froze because part of her knew he wasn't entirely wrong. Every soldier eventually wonders if the trigger they pulled was truly theirs. But this wasn't about guilt. It was about choice. She steadied her hand. The difference between us, Major, is that I remember who I did it for. And then the lights exploded. Gunfire erupted from the catwalk above. 2 guards dropped from the rafters, opening fire. Bullets ricocheted off steel. Nina dove behind a crate, returned fire. 2 quick bursts, clean hits. The air filled with smoke and dust, alarms screaming to life. When the haze cleared, Blackwood was gone. She moved fast, heart steady, scanning for exits. Through the open stairwell, she saw him descending to the lower level toward a reinforced door. She followed. The lower chamber was different, colder, darker. Banks of servers blinked like artificial stars. In the center stood a table covered with hard drives and old mission dossiers. And on the table a photo. Her father. Alive. Kneeling. Behind him Blackwood, holding a pistol to his head. The image froze her breath. That's your proof, said Blackwood's voice from the shadows, if you survive long enough to show it. She spun toward the sound. He stepped out slowly, pistol raised. Your father begged me to protect you, said you were better than him. He believed you could change the world. Her eyes burned. You used his death to build your empire. I preserved order, he said, and now I'll end the last piece of chaos he left behind. The shot came fast. She dropped, rolled, fired back. Sparks burst from the steel. He moved like a ghost through smoke, his shots precise, economical. But Nina had learned from ghosts too. She sidestepped, aimed low, clipped his leg. He stumbled, firing wildly. She closed the distance, slammed him against the server rack. The lights flickered as bullets tore into circuits. Sparks rained down, orange and white. He caught her wrist, twisted, their weapons clattered to the floor. For a moment it wasn't soldier against soldier. It was teacher against student, monster against memory. You're your father's curse, he growled, forcing her back. He made you in his image and look what you've become, another killer searching for permission to feel pure. Her shoulder screamed as she shoved against him. No, she hissed, I'm what he left to finish it. She drove her knee into his chest, broke his grip, and grabbed the nearest weapon, his sidearm. He froze, blood seeping down his leg, one hand raised. You can't kill me, he said quietly. You need me to explain what happens when I'm gone. I don't need explanations, she said. I need closure. Her finger flexed. "Do you think this ends with me?" he pressed. "There's 100 more like me. The system breathes us out when it needs balance. You kill one, another replaces him." "Then I'll keep shooting," she said. He smiled faintly, even through pain. "Your father said that too." That was enough. The shot echoed like thunder. Blackwood fell, eyes wide open, surprise frozen in them. The silence that followed was thick, almost sacred. The kind of silence that only comes when something ancient inside you finally stops screaming. She stood over him, breathing hard. The servers hissed, melting under stray rounds. Data feeds blinked, then died. Around her, the monitors went black, one by one. The consortium's brain had flatlined. But she knew better than to believe in clean endings. She picked up the photo from the table, her father, frozen in that last moment, and whispered, "It's done, Pappy." Then she limped toward the stairwell, fire and smoke rising behind her. Outside, dawn broke weak and gray over the Thames. Emergency, sirens wailed in the distance. The warehouse burned, its reflection flickering across the river like dying light. She sat on the dock, rain mixing with blood on her sleeve. Her shoulder ached, her lungs burned, but she felt still. For the first time in years, there was no noise in her head. Then her phone buzzed. One message, encrypted. "Hughes files verified, consortium exposed, Interpol moving in. You did it, Nina." She stared at the screen, barely breathing. A small, tired smile found her. Then another message came through. "Unknown number, one falls, another rises." She looked up. Across the river, through the mist, a man in a black coat watched her. Not military, not police, just still. When she met his gaze, he turned and vanished into the crowd. She stayed by the river until the flames died. Somewhere behind her, sirens grew louder. Somewhere ahead, the world would pretend justice had been served. But in the quiet between, she felt something her father used to call the space after the shot. It wasn't peace, it wasn't victory. It was the echo of choice, the reminder that even righteous bullets leave scars that don't heal. She pulled out her father's rangefinder, aimed it toward the horizon, and whispered, "Distance unknown, wind variable, target silence." Then she smiled faintly, stood and walked away, disappearing into the waking city. What happens to a weapon once it's fired when the mission, over, and the silence finally arrives? 3 weeks after London burned, a storm drifted across the Atlantic, following the same path Nina Castillo had taken home. Somewhere beneath that clouded sky, on a freight ship bound for Virginia, she sat alone in the crew quarters, unarmed, unnamed, and for the first time in her life without orders. The world was already rewriting the story. News anchors called it the consortium collapse. Politicians called it a multinational security breach. They never said her name, they never said his. Maybe that was the point. The port came into view one gray dawn. A lone flag fluttered above the customs building, red, white, blue. She watched it ripple in the wind, a symbol that once felt like purpose, now just a memory stitched in color. She didn't go to the barracks, didn't call Hughes, didn't report in. Instead, she drove south. Miles rolled beneath the tires, pine highway silence. Until finally, the GPS map turned into dirt and grass. The cemetery was small, military. Just rows of white stones, identical, perfectly aligned. She found him at the far edge, where the trees began. DIGOCSTLLO, honor, duty, sacrifice. The words looked clean, too clean. Like truth edited for public release. She knelt, fingers brushing the stone. The chill bit into her skin. "Hey, Pappy," she whispered. The wind carried her voice somewhere soft. "They told me you died in service, that you were a hero. They didn't tell me what kind." Her throat tightened. "I met him, Blackwood. I did what you couldn't." She paused, eyes wet, and I wish I hadn't. For a long time she stayed there, not speaking, just breathing with the silence. Then she pulled the small wooden box from her pack, the one Sullivan had given her. Inside was the photo of her father, smiling under a desert sun. She set it beside the stone. "You told me once," she whispered, "that dignity doesn't need an audience. That doing the right thing isn't about who sees it, it's about who still can look in the mirror after." Her voice trembled. "I don't know if I can, Pappy." A tear slipped down her cheek, but I tried. When she stood again, a man waited by the gate. Gray suit, badge clipped to his belt. "Staff Sergeant Castillo." She didn't answer. "I'm Agent Daniels, Office of Special Investigations." He gestured toward a black sedan parked nearby. "We've been trying to locate you. Washington's got questions." "Washington always does," she said quietly. He hesitated. "You're not under arrest, technically, but you were involved in something extraordinary. They want a debrief." She looked past him at the endless rows of graves. "You mean they want to clean up the story?" He didn't deny it. "There's also interest in your future. Someone like you doesn't just disappear." She gave a faint, bitter smile. "Maybe that's exactly what I'm trying to do." Daniels lowered his voice. "You exposed a corruption ring that crossed 3 governments. You did more in 6 weeks than half our agencies have done in 6 years. And killed a man doing it." He nodded slowly. "Sometimes that's what truth costs." She looked at him for a long time. "No," she said, "that's what lies cost." Then she turned away and walked past him, leaving the badge, the offer, and the old life behind. For months she vanished. Rumors whispered through the ranks that she'd joined a private firm, that she'd died in a car crash, that she'd been recruited by intelligence. But none of them were true. Nina Castillo became what her father had once called the quiet kind of soldier, the kind who stopped fighting wars and started saving people from them. She crossed borders under false names, helped civilians escape from cartel zones, trained women in conflict areas to defend themselves, and vanished before the press ever arrived. No one took pictures. That was how she wanted it. Every life she helped, every child who made it through the night, it didn't fix her, but it steadied her. Because the only thing harder than killing a ghost is living with one. One evening, deep in the deserts of Jordan, she found herself teaching a group of young recruits how to measure wind distance. The sun dipped low, painting the sand in copper light. One of the girls, maybe 18, asked, "Ma'am, how do you know where to aim when you can't see the target?" Nina paused. The question hung in the dry air like a memory. She adjusted the girl's grip gently, her voice soft. "You don't always need to see the target," she said. "You just have to trust that the reason you're aiming is still worth it." The girl nodded, eyes focused, steady. For a moment, Nina saw herself, young, eager, believing the uniform would always mean good. She almost smiled. That night when the camp was quiet, she sat outside her tent, staring at the stars. The wind was soft, the air still warm from the day. She pulled out the rangefinder, her father's, still scarred and dented, still working. When she looked through it, she didn't see targets anymore. Just distance, endless, beautiful distance. Her sat phone buzzed once, a secure message. "LEILAHUGHES, consortium trials started. Global broadcast tomorrow. They're calling it Operation Clean House. You did it, Nina." She stared at the screen for a long time, then typed back, "No, we did what we had to." A pause, then another message appeared. "HUGHES, what will you do now?" Nina looked out at the stars. "Keep breathing," she typed, "and maybe teach others to aim for something better." She switched the phone off and let the desert swallow the rest. Months later, back in the U.S., Agent Daniels sat in a windowless room at Langley reviewing closed files. One folder, Red-tagged restricted access carried her name. CSTLLO, NINAA. Status unresolved. Last known location, classified redacted. Operational outcome, positive/irregular. He leaned back, shaking his head. She just vanished, he murmured. Across from him, Hughes smiled faintly. That's what ghosts do when their war is over. Daniels raised an eyebrow. You think it's really over? Hughes looked out the narrow window at the rain falling over D.C. for her. Maybe. For us, probably not. Somewhere in South America, months later, a storm rolled over the jungle. Hidden in the hills, a convoy of mercenaries trudged toward a rebel outpost. Through the scope of a suppressed rifle, a gloved hand adjusted for wind. Nina exhaled, calm, precise. Her shot split the air like truth through lies. The convoy halted. The innocent would live another night. She lowered the rifle, breath steady. No medals, no witnesses, no glory. Just purpose, quiet, imperfect human purpose. She packed up, melted into the rain, and disappeared once more into the green silence. Later that night, she wrote a single line in her notebook, the same one her father used to keep. Sometimes dignity doesn't speak, it simply acts. She closed it, tucked it away, and stared into the storm until dawn. Narrator soft, closing voiceover tone. She wasn't the kind of hero stories are written about. She was the kind that never asks for credit, never gets statues, never tells the world what she lost. Because the truth about war isn't victory, it's what it costs the ones who survive it. Nina Castillo didn't die a legend, she lived a lesson. And somewhere in the quiet corners of the world, when the wind slows and the night holds its breath, there's still a woman with a rifle watching the horizon, reminding the world that sometimes the strongest ones are the ones who walk away.